Folks, Canadian Prepper here. Guys, the world is about to become an incredibly violent place. I repeat, the world is about to become an incredibly violent place. There are some unprecedented economic indicators that are pointing towards the collapse of the Western financial system, and it's going to be bloody. It's going to be bloody because there is no peacetime dividend. If you don't know what the peacetime dividend is, it's this idea that when there's no war going on, even if economic times are bad, the peace, the relative peace and civility that exists between nations can create a foundation for commerce to flourish. Do we have that right now while three superpowers are on the brink of nuclear war? Absolutely not. And we need to talk about this graph that has been keeping me up at night. Well, not only this graph, but several graphs like it that have been keeping me up at night. And nuclear war and World War III, these things give me nightmares, okay? I can't even sleep when I think about this because it's absolute. It's 100% going to happen. It's just a question of when the whole house of cards collapses. And when it does, it is going to be raucous. People are going to be losing their minds. If you think the degradation of society and our culture over the last 20 years has been bad, wait till people really can't get what they want. Never mind what they want, what they need. It's going to get ugly, really, really ugly. So needless to say, personal security for yourself and your family and your neighborhood and your extended family are of utmost importance at this point in time. We also need to talk about a few other stories. In the last 24 hours, Moscow installing air defense systems on their buildings in their cities. Okay? Installing air defense systems in the city. Why would they ever want to do such a thing? They've actually did this a couple weeks ago, but now they're doing it more. They're putting more of these air defense systems in place. This has been confirmed. This is not conspiracy. This is on Newsweek. Take it for what it's worth with a grain of salt, but it's out there in the mainstream media. We also have 4 major meetings that have taken place in the past week that all point towards a major commitment of NATO to escalate this conflict to a far more confrontational level between NATO and Russia. People think I'm alarmist and sensationalist. I could care less because it's all going to make sense someday, unfortunately. And I say unfortunately because I don't want things to progress in this way. I want my children to have a future, but all economic indicators point towards a war economy is likely going to be the way that they get us out of this situation. And I don't mean get us out in a good way. War economies suck, okay? War rations suck. If you think I'm alarmist, go and listen to the recent interview with Gerald Celente in Kitco News, where he basically terrified this poor reporter when she's interviewing him. I can't remember what her name is, but Gerald Celente, you know, this guy has made some very, very accurate predictions. And if you think I'm alarmist in what I'm saying, make sure you go and check out that video afterwards, because I'm not alarmist enough. And he's saying the exact same things that I'm saying, yet because I'm a little new to this scene, people are in doubt, and I understand you should be skeptical. But when I say World War III started today, obviously World War III is ongoing. The reason why we make thumbnails and sensationalist titles like that is we are competing with billions of minutes of sludge content put there for the purpose of diverting people from what matters most, and that's focusing on the future. Now, when this whole house of cards collapses, if you got money to short the markets and you know how to do that, maybe you can ride it all the way down. All the more power to you. But for 99% of people, that's not going to be a reality. And I've been saying for the longest time that the protests are what happen next. The violence starts now, because you're going to see we are the 99% 2.0. We're already seeing it in France. Of course, they're not calling it that. You're seeing these images that look like what was just happening in Iran coming out of France, yet there's not the same global outcry for some reason, because they're trying to tack on 2 more years to the pension plan so that they can make the whole thing work till 2027. Are you kidding me? The whole thing is collapsing, and they want to go to war with the one country who's providing them cheap energy. Guys, it is worse than bad. Okay, now we got a lot of things to talk about. You know, the head of the Russian Orthodox Church basically coming out and saying, yeah, nuclear war is likely going to happen. We have the Moscow air defense thing. We have some suspicions that Moscow is doing this Trojan horse thing where they're sneaking in troops on cargo trains into Belarus, planning a surprise offensive from the north. You can't make this stuff up, okay? And that's on Newsweek. That's mainstream media. We're going to talk about a variety of things, but let's start here, okay? Personal savings rate, 2.4%. Literally at the lowest it's been, 2.4%. That means of all the take-home pay on average, people are saving 2.4%. Look what it was during the pandemic when Powell was pumping the market with those stimmy checks, okay? It was way the hell up here at, what was it? 35% people were saving, okay? Now, look at the credit card debt. On top of all the other financial indicators we have talked about on this channel, look at the credit card debt is at a record high. Let me get off here for a sec so you guys can see this. It is at a record high. Not only that, the average credit card interest rate is at a record high. What do you think is going to happen when people have no more money to pay the bills that are still inflating? We're seeing inflation that is still off the charts, that has compounded to the point where it's stagflationary. People's wages are not keeping pace. You have big tech laying off people left and right. Guys, this is not just a recession. Okay, this is the beginning of the next Great Depression. Look at this graph. I've been saying this for the longest time. Of course, everybody, they're still getting sucked into these bull traps. What I mean by bull trap is that today the markets rallied once again for no good reason whatsoever. It's a bull trap, my friends. Mark my words. You see this right here? You see if I can, I got to get a better system here. Jesus. So right now the Schiller PE ratio is 29.5. During Black Tuesday, it was right around the same amount, 30. Black Tuesday, that day before we seen the Great Depression, okay, 1930, people think in their right minds, this is the average. Again, the average is like 15. It can go down to 5. Think about how much the markets have crashed since 2021. Now, imagine another 80%. 80%, the blood in the streets, guys. The violence that is about to ensue worldwide because of the collapse of everything is just staggering to think about. Now, people will say, well, there's still some, possibility it could bounce back up. Look, everything regresses to the mean. In life, in the universe, it all regresses to the mean. I mean, even Black Monday here. Geez, I got it. I'm looking at a screen in this. Black Monday, this thing still crashed. That was a terrible day, terrifying day. So what I'm saying is the market is overvalued. Everybody is out of money. The money is worth less, and we're going to war. There's no peacetime dividend. So tell me why on earth was there a market rally today? What possible reason could there have been? The only way to really make money in this market is maybe by shorting it, if you're playing the stock market, that is. Now, in terms of what you can do, we're going to talk about the war stuff, but I should get to this because people say I'm not providing enough solutions. We do many videos, 2 a week, in fact, that are not daily doom and gloom stuff. They're higher produced, higher production value. We put a lot more work into those, and they're more solution focused. We released one yesterday, which is a little devious in some of our suggestions, but we're talking about what you can do if the shit hits the fan in your city and you got nothing, and maybe you're not in your city. Maybe you got to scavenge. We talk about different places where you can find resources. Go check that video out. Part 2 is coming out tomorrow. Things you can do, just off the top of my head, Craigslist, okay? There's a lot of free stuff that you can find on Craigslist. If you can take any odd jobs, any and every odd job. Right now, I would say if you had to educate yourself, if you had to go and seek an education, do it in something that is not that abstract, something that is absolutely going to be required, something that is essential. Remember when they were calling people essential and non-essential? I believe that everybody's essential, But the fact is, when times get bad, there are some lines of employment that are going to be far more essential than others, okay? Fitness. Fitness is free. You don't need a gym membership to start taking care of yourself and stop stuffing your face with that crap. Foraging, hunting. Did you know that in many parts of the world, you can actually go out into the forest and find food, wild edibles, resources that you can actually use and harvest? Hunting is another thing. If you have time and you're not doing anything anyways, and you have a few bullets to spare, then you should be out there procuring some wild game. Budgeting is absolutely number one. We've done several videos on how to prepare on a budget, but I'm having a feeling I'm going to have to revisit that, because when I say the future is looking very bloody right now, it is. I think the only way they pull us out of this is with a war, war-style economy that we've seen during World War II, okay? And that's what really rallied everybody out of the dirty 30s. And remember, the dirty 30s were largely the result of mismanaged agriculture, okay? And that's what caused the Dust Bowl and all that stuff. So that could very well happen again. Everybody knows that the current state of things in the world with respect to the weather patterns is very, very abnormal, so not looking good. The Russian patriarch gives a doomsday warning to Moscow's rivals. When you have the head of an Orthodox church, no matter what your thoughts are on religion, just looking at this objectively, that is dangerous, because it's almost giving moral or ethical authority to the idea. And that's a big mental hurdle that a lot of people have to overcome who are religious, is coming to terms with that and giving license to our leaders to make these moves. I'm going to talk about in the next video, but there was some research done. It's a virtual reality simulation where you are the president and you're given 3 options, because you're told that there's 300 ICBMs inbound, and you're given 3 options as to what to do, and you're surrounded by all these people and the pressure's on, and it's an interesting simulation, but it shows you that we're living at a period of time where accidents can happen. And as I've said, it's not even so much that the world leaders are willing to intentionally take us to the nuclear war level, it's that it can happen accidentally. The closer we get, the closer NATO gets to Russia, which they are going to with this massive weapons package, the higher the likelihood of nuclear accidents happening, okay? One of the primary stories of the past week, let's just talk about this real first. Okay, so air defense system installed in Moscow near Putin's residence. Now, this is not new. It's new, the new installment that has been caught on camera. I don't have a picture of it here, unfortunately, but you can go and find it online. It's mainstream news. It's not new, but it's something which is concerning, because since the Ukrainians targeted the Russian nuclear triad with a drone strike that penetrated well into Russia, not too far from Moscow to be exact, the Russians have been on edge. And guys, you think I'm alarmist and sensationalist, but man, you do not understand. Anybody who thinks I'm being alarmist and sensationalist has zero idea what is actually going on. You have zero idea the gravity of the situation, okay? You just go back to that sludge bullshit content if you think that this is a joke. I'm sorry to get so fired up, but it pisses me off sometimes that people do not comprehend the situation that we're in and how serious it is. Now, Germany, they came out and said, look, we're not going to approve the release of these Leopard tanks. Many NATO countries have Leopard tanks. The idea is that the Ukrainians need heavy armor in order to really take it to the Russians and push them out of their territory. Everybody's wondering, why haven't they done this yet? Irrespective of the fact that they've given literally everything else under the sun except the ATACMS, the long-range missiles, and the fighter jets. Okay, that's really all there is left. The fighter jets, tanks, and ATACMS. All very significant things, but they're sending all kinds of anti-tank weapons. They're sending, I don't even recall it all off the top of my head, but it's a huge list of stuff. And all of these countries are sending these things. So And Germany too, okay? Get a load of this. Germany is, however, even though they haven't confirmed that they're going to be sending these tanks, which in themselves, 100 tanks is not a big deal in this war, especially when you have Ukraine claiming that they've taken out 6,000 Russian tanks. Take that with a big bag of salt. The Russians are saying they took out like 2,000 Ukrainian tanks or something. Maybe a bit closer to reality. Regardless, this is what Germany is saying. Germany is, however, preparing to potentially deliver the tanks rapidly if the go-ahead is given, Pistorius stated. Boris Pistorius, the guy with the great name who just became Germany's defense minister, he announced that he had ordered a nationwide tank inspection to determine the number of pieces of the equipment the country has in stock, both in the German armed forces, the Bundeswehr, and at industrial warehouses. So it's mission creep. They're going to send them. They're getting them all ready. And the thing is, that the perplexing thing about all this is, to me, is why are they even announcing it in the first place? You know what I mean? If this was really serious, we're talking about people dying here and losing billions of dollars worth of equipment, why would you advertise that? Now, the Americans have been quite transparent, and they said, look, the only reason why they're not doing it is because of logistical reasons. So you're telling me you can't get an Abrams tank into Ukraine? People will say, yeah, we can't. And maybe they're right, because it's not easy sneaking stuff over the border in the middle of the night, or however it is they're doing it right now in defiance of Russian airstrikes, okay? It's not entirely clear. But there's a lot of unknowns in this conflict. Zelensky's still walking around. I mean, you would have thought. Everybody thinks Russia's a bad shot. Well, there was a part in the first phase of this war where they were doing precision strikes on mercenary barracks. 400 guys, I believe, were taken out with one missile, and that was way the hell out in Lviv. So you know they have the capability. Now, I've heard it said that you don't take out leaders and you don't, target like the capitals within a capital because it just wartime etiquette. I don't know. I mean, that could just be nonsense. But there's things in this conflict that just don't add up. That's one of them. If NATO is doing this, why wouldn't they just, send it in secret and then it shows up on the battlefield? Maybe they're worried that the Russians will presume then that NATO is in those tanks and that it's not Ukrainians operating those tanks or mercenaries. Doesn't matter, because we know that NATO mercenaries are there. And again, I'm not speaking this from a place of preference. This is from Time magazine. This happens all the time in this conflict. An AWOL Navy SEAL killed fighting in Ukraine. If you guys knew how much this has happened, I don't share half the information I consume in a day. I mean, I've seen so much bloody footage of war. I think my brain is scrambled now because of it. Because the websites I go to get all this information, to really try to figure out what's out there, it's horrendous stuff that's happening right now. But there are a lot of people who are not Ukrainian soldiers in Ukrainian uniforms. Okay, that's all I'm going to say. Not speaking from a matter of preference, not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying it is what it is. And we're getting really close, guys. We're getting very close. The Kremlin declines to say if Moscow is preparing for airstrikes. Now, this is from the Moscow Times, which is really not a pro-Russian website at all, but it is. It's a pro-Western website. Now, we've had 4 meetings in the last week. Okay, we had the meeting that took place today at Ramstein Air Force Base. You notice how I said it right there, guys? All you grammar NAZIs out there. Some people, they ruminate and trivialize the most important things. Just focus on the analysis, please. If I mispronounce things that are in different languages, it shouldn't be a big deal. But I think people like that, quite frankly, aren't going to survive that long anyways. Ramstein Air Force Base, where all of the chiefs of staff of all the NATO countries met today. Again, this, I believe, was it the 5th or the 8th meeting of this group? But this was so critical because of the pressure on Germany to give the green light to give these tanks. Now, Germany is saying, As soon as the United States sends one Abrams tank over that border, we're going to give you the green light. You can send your tanks, because Germany wants to know that the Americans are with them and that they're not going to abandon them when the shizzy hits the fizzy, because it's literally, lickety-split, one tactical nuclear strike and a lot of bad things happen. And Germany realizes it, and a lot of NATO doesn't really know if the United States really has their back. There's that disunity there. We're seeing that in France, where people are just losing their frickin' minds over, 2 years tacked on to the pension. So you have to work for 2 more years to get your pension. Guess what? Here in Canada, it's 67. So as much as I sympathize, I kind of don't sympathize, because we're working until 67 because our population is aging as well. And the only thing keeping us afloat and keeping the tax base up is immigration. You see, the leaders in the world, I'm going off on a rant right now, they understand that the only way they can continue to pay the taxes and continue the fiat monetary bubble is if they have human resources to generate more income tax down the road. Doesn't matter if they're on welfare for the first 10 years they get here. At some point down the road, the idea is their kids are going to work and they're going to pay taxes. The American dollar is only as good as the human collateral that supports it. Okay, so this idea of this anti-immigration stuff, I get how it's, there's politically wielded in order to profiteer and bring wages down and this and that. I get all that, but the big broader picture is what the elites are concerned about, and they're concerned about us not repopulating enough to pay off the taxes. Now, hopefully they're just going to, maybe this debt, this elusive debt that's out there in the ether is just going to correct itself as the whole world defaults at the same time, let the chips fall where they may. I don't know. But anyways, I'm getting off topic totally. Let's bring it back to the meetings that have transpired this week. We have Zelensky meeting in secret with the CIA director Burns in Kiev. I believe this was the second time this has transpired. That's pretty significant. The CIA director going to Kiev. Why would you even go there in the first place? Okay, obviously they're very concerned about the Russians hacking into their communications. They claim that they hear everything that the Russians are doing. I've heard Peter Zayan say that several times. Obviously, he speaks very confidently about things he claims to know about. I don't agree with maybe 50% of what he says, but he's very, of course, pro-Western, and he has the conflicts of interest to prove it. Okay, but I will say that these other meetings that we've had with Mark Milley meeting at the border with Commander Zaluzny on the Ukrainian border, obviously they're talking about preparation for a major offensive. You have all these weapons flooding in at the same time. The Russians are possibly doing some weird stuff in Belarus. Putin's Trojan War is Russia hiding troops in cargo tanks for a Kiev push. Possibly, I mean, there's so many strange and unexplained phenomena in this conflict. And of course, you have the meeting at Davos, where it was basically obvious that the Western world was okay going to war with Russia. I posted the, I think it was Ian Bremmer clip. He was a reporter in Davos who basically explicitly stated that NATO is in a hot war with Russia. They need to do everything they can to support it. So there's these things that we have to reconcile. We have to understand that not only, irrespective of the war that's going on, the economy is tanking, and it's tanking fast. And a part of that is due with the lack of peacetime dividend. There is no foundation for which we can build back a better economy, at least not in the short term. Now, maybe in a decade or two, if we don't blow ourselves up, the United States and the West will reindustrialize with what energy? I don't know. Maybe solar, maybe wind. I'm sure everybody has an opinion about that. The point being is that that's the only way out of this, is decoupling. And that decoupling is going to be incredibly painful. And people are going to be losing their minds. And unfortunately, in this society, when that happens and people have access to certain tools that gets ugly. And when you have a lot of people on psychopharmaceuticals who are not properly medicated, they don't have the time to see an actual psychotherapist, they're just drugged to high heaven, then bad things can happen at times like these. People get really squirrely, and that is what I'm concerned about. I think we are the 99% one. Wall Street protest was relatively civil. I don't think it's going to be. There's been too much, we've strayed too far. We've become way too polarized. The polemic is way too extreme nowadays for it at all to be a smooth process. So I'm incredibly concerned about the security domestically and, of course, abroad. And this information that I reported today was from Zero Hedge with respect to some of the numbers that they're pulling with respect to credit card debt and other things. And it's looking pretty scary, guys. Very scary stuff. It would be fine if one of these things was, if it was just one of these things that we were dealing with. But because it's all happening at the same time and converging at the same time, it's quite terrifying. These protests in France, I got to commend the French for actually getting out there, but the police show no sign of sparing them. We have Google, who has sent out an email here. This is Sundar Pichai laying off 12,000 employees. Okay, not looking good there. Another North Carolina power station damaged by apparent gunfire weeks after grid attacks left thousands without power. Now, the FBI is framing this as right-wing extremism, but they're not giving any reason as to why you would do this. I mean, if that's the case, then clearly they were trying to do it for a reason, to shut down a protest or to shut down some kind of event or for some reason. You don't just arbitrarily shoot up a substation and don't take responsibility. Like, what sort of thing do you have to gain from doing that? So I still suspect that there might be some kind of sleeper cell action going on here. We are in a world war, and we are in a hot world war, as many correspondents have already said. So it would not surprise me if that was the case. This was that study that was done. This is from the Financial Times. 300 nuclear missiles are heading your way. You must respond. What now? It's a virtual reality simulation. I'll see if I can get some more information on that. Now, I said I was going to talk a bit about sludge content. Sludge content consuming TikTok. What is it? Well, it's this idea that we need our attention spans are so short that it's not enough that the clips are like 10 seconds now. We actually need two screens playing completely unrelated things. So something colorful and visually stimulating over top of something else being said. Now, you remember that scene in Idiocracy where the guy's sitting on his chair and he's watching like the 10 screens at once? I mean, that's literally what this is. We're so overstimulated, our dopamine receptors are so fried, and we're not willing to go into any amount of depth whatsoever. And if you see the odd sensationalist, alarmist thumbnail from me, this is why. This is what we're competing with. We're competing with that slot machine that is TikTok, Shorts, or Reels. Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. It's the only way to get people's attention. Like, you almost have to like pull them out of it somehow, because this is the future. This is why we've diversified into Shorts, because it's the future. You can't fight the future. You have to adapt to it somehow. Now, that doesn't mean that long-form content is not going to be a thing, but not for the new generation, guys. It may get a return at some point. I mean, we've been down the road with Vine. The only reason why Vine ended is because it didn't find a way to monetize. And but it's scary. I mean, this is what you would expect to happen before we were merged with some sort of neurological circuitry that allowed us to process more information. And that's what Elon Musk was talking about with Neuralink, is that there's so much content to consume that we can't consume it all with one stream of consciousness and being limited by our fingertips to interact with the device, The interface is too primitive, so we need a direct neural uplink of this crap, nonstop, 24/7. Can you imagine how shallow people are going to become? And this is why I say, imagine the lights go out. It might be the best thing that ever happened to the world, but the lights go out, the medication stops coming in, and you got a lot of very entitled, angry people taking to the streets. The future is going to be bloody, folks. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. I got to go. And stay tuned. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about more urban survival tips for when it all goes down. Take care, guys.